conferences for offshore. I was in Shanghai working 10 years ago for EB5 programs, and I noticed that a lot of companies come in and don't have the awareness of the local, what's happening locally. So this is for the members of the AOA that are here that might not know the local intricacies of Vietnam. I've been living in Vietnam now 8 years, almost 9 years. I live here, I'm a resident of Vietnam. I have 3 children and a Vietnamese wife. So I'm very much aware of what's happening, and you can see here what's going to happen between now, well, up to 2030. You're going to see that 4 to 5 of the largest economies will be in Asia. So there's a lot of changes have happened since I've been here 8 years, and there's a lot more changes to come. Ideal both for offshore investments coming in to Vietnam, and also offshore investments going out, and also dealing with collaborating with IPAs, investment promotion agencies, and such in Vietnam to promote local investment. You can see there's some new conditions required to set up foreign invest in vocational training institutions in Vietnam in the region. They introduced me today and talked about the AOA2019. I'd just like to briefly, if you'd like to know any more information with regards to what's happening domestically, there's the white book that was it's published every year. I contribute to 2 chapters in the white book, and you can download it online at the European Chamber of Commerce website. Each chapter is organized with relevant government authorities and summary of the key concerns. I'm on the legal committee for AOA2019, and I contributed to the mediation chapter of the white book. It has potential gains and concerns for Vietnam and recommendations. It's published both in Vietnamese and in English. One topic that's going to affect Southeast Asia is the new infrastructure planning that China is proposing. They're going to be spending over the next 10 years $30 trillion in the region for infrastructure development. And I just read in the Vietnam news just 2 weeks ago that Laos had their first connection between Laos and Bangkok in 50 years for rail expansion. So there's a lot of development locally with regards to the Silk Road initiative that China is proposing. Well, China is implementing. I'm speaking actually at the end of the month at the Asian Rail Infrastructure and Expansion Conference held here in Hanoi in 2 weeks. And I'll be discussing cross-border disputes regarding infrastructure development. A lot of disputes occur cross-border, not only in the APEC region, but all over the world. And we have various ways that we can resolve these disputes that come up. And there's going to be a lot of disputes regarding investment, regarding construction and such. And so I'm going to talk about online dispute resolution at this conference. I read this the other day. Who wins from the China-US trade war? And this is dated just the other day, and it's in Vietnam. So Vietnam is going to benefit from a trade war that's going on here, which is going to really affect the area. Trump's trade approach under attack as China readies retaliation, markets poised for a big sell-off. That just happened. That was just reported a few days ago. Another development that I'd like to tell everybody about is the European-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement that's being delayed again until next year. Eurocham is very heavily involved with this free trade agreement. Eurocham released its EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement report in 2018. Currently, Vietnam is the EU's second biggest trading partner in the Asian community after Singapore. So $55.1 billion. You can get a copy of this report again on Eurocham website, and you can download it. It's very interesting reading. The EU Free Trade Agreement will eliminate tariffs on 90% of Vietnamese goods, and for the other 10% of goods, cut the average import tax by 10 to 20 basis points. Currently, they're about 4.1%. So this is something that you should be aware of. It's been delayed to 2020. The parliament elections, which took place this month, actually the ratification was not done in time for the new parliament, so it's going to be delayed till 2020. Another area that I'd like to talk about in dispute resolution, resolving cross-border dispute resolution regarding investment, cross-border construction, is APEC now has a dispute, they're implementing a dispute, the European Vietnam Free Trade Agreement is going to incorporate a dispute resolution platform. So it will protect investors. It's an agreement between two or more countries which aims to protect investors. Usually when there's a dispute between an investor and a host country, investors can reach out to the World Bank, but this will allow them to deal with disputes, investment, trade disputes directly with European countries. So it's a treaty that's part of the European Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. So it involves creating a tribunal. So it's a permanent dispute resolution system that's going to be set up. Domestic courts will not be allowed to intervene or question the decision of the tribunals to ensure transparency and fair treatment. So this is a sticking point that's still being trying to resolve to ratify this treaty. APEC is also initiating a platform. An online dispute resolution framework could be a game changer for businesses. So they're going to be working on a platform. I got invited to go to Japan next month to talk about this pilot project that is being developed, because everything is going online. We're having disputes online and such, and so we can resolve things online. I interviewed Michael J. Dennis. He's from the US on my podcast. You could listen to the podcast and then you could talk about this. Just for the sake of saving time, I was going to have everybody listen to a bit of the podcast, but I want to keep the presentation short. But one of the questions I was going to propose to you was, how long on average does it take APEC courts to resolve a simple contract? And can anybody guess which is the correct answer?
C.
Could you have a guess? C, yeah. It takes over a year and a half, almost a year and a half, on average. Average means it could be 3 years. It could be, just less than that. So we have to find a better way to resolve disputes, especially if you have a case involving an investor, dealing with offshore or whatever. You want to be able to resolve things online without having to go to arbitration and other courts. Another development is e-commerce and the Singapore Convention. I got invited to go to Singapore in July for the signing of a treaty which is related to mediation and also covers online mediation, which is very similar to the New York Convention. So this is a very interesting development that's going to help resolve disputes regarding investment and trade cross-border. The convention is Singapore Convention on Mediation. It's the first treaty to be named after Singapore among the treaties under the United Nations. Okay. It has conditions for to be fulfilled in order for signing a country to enforce a settlement agreement. So this resolves dispute cross-border. It could be investment disputes, it could be any type of dispute. And you can enforce these disputes under the convention. So you don't need to have to go to the local courts. They can be resolved just through a mediation process. And this is enforceable, so you don't need to go to the local courts and drag it out for 2 years. And it lists the recommendations for that and what needs to be done in order to resolve the dispute. Another area that I'd like to talk about briefly is how blockchain and cryptocurrencies are affecting cross-border investment, cross-border development in this area. So there's a lot of people there's a buzzword about blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I just want to give you a little overview and my opinion about this area. How do blockchain and decentralization help the banking industry? First, a public chain is immutable. You cannot change it. It's permanent. So that's a good thing, and the banking industry needs something that it cannot be changed. It requires record keeping, and you can keep this for up to 5 years. Second, the records are stored in a decentralized manner. Currently, right now, most of the documents you send for your clients and to the lawyers and all that are either distributed or centralized. The blockchain allows for decentralization of the documents, keep things more secure. So it protects from fraud, hacking, and other cyber-related crimes, provides security and consistency that is simply impossible to achieve with current centralized record-keeping technology. So right now, when you have documents that you send about your investor, about you want to send overseas, they're either distributed or centralized, and they're not secure. So this allows for centralized record-keeping technology. Data privacy, that's another issue. Know your customer. Documentation can be managed by reliable, decentralized applications and smart contracts. There's no need for trust. You just need to rely on centralized companies to manage the personal information. So this is the third advantage of this. Another problem with offshore, there's a problem also with offshore banks that are having, it's become nearly impossible to get or keep correspondent banking relationship. If a foreign bank wants to do business in US dollars, they must have a corresponding US partner. So a lot of times, there might be some companies that are looking at having investors invest overseas, either through a residency program or starting a new company. And the problem is that you need a correspondent bank to set that up. So many times people say, a client would say, I've got 10 billion dong, $500,000 USD. That will open up a set of problems specific for US dollars. Another client would say, I have my money in Vietnamese dong. That might set another set of problems. The thing that you need to be concerned about is that there's a lot of currency restrictions that are not universal throughout the region. So there's a lot of companies that come to Vietnam and thinking that they're working under the same guidelines as they do maybe in Singapore, which is completely different. This is why I question when a lot of lawyers claim they do due diligence on a lot of these contracts involving investment offshore and things like that. But I don't understand how they can do due diligence when they're not experts in that specific region. So I refer a lot of the business to the experts in the region in order to do due diligence. I don't understand how a Vietnamese lawyer could do due diligence for an investment in Europe and do the whole service. So I'd be a little wary about due diligence and not using local expertise. So do you know your customers? Today it's nearly impossible to get a correspondent banking account for a small or startup offshore bank. There are very few correspondent banks with know your customers customer services that will take these offshore banks. The same goes with fintech companies that accept client deposits. If a client will deposit money into your bank account, you know you have all kinds of your client anti-money laundering rules to follow. So there's specific concerns relating to specific investments that only a local lawyer will know about in the region. If you fail to keep proper track of your clients, they hide untaxed money or do something illegal using your correspondent bank, then you have liability which could be in the millions of dollars. So you might have a client and everything looks great, but you'll be liable because of issues related to the claims of that client. Blockchain and fiat-backed tokens. Basically, it's not just US dollars, euros, or Vietnamese dong, but backed by a fiat currency. Clients could hold their accounts in a USD-dominated token and transfer that token rather than US dollars to overcome some of these, eliminating the need for a US dollar correspondent bank. Many of the best financial service companies and banks are leaving Hong Kong and Cayman for Puerto Rico. In fact, Puerto Rico is the second largest financial center after the Cayman Islands. They can join the US system in Puerto Rico and eliminate most of the compliance and other issues that operate in a major jurisdiction. It could be this is for Europe as an example, but the same applies for, in the US as an example, but the same applies for Europe. So financial centers, they need a way to opt out of traditional banking to reduce the risks of the correspondent banking. So blockchain is going to revolutionize the offshore financial industry. It's already happening, and to take care of these jurisdictions. So offshore banks have high transaction costs. To send a wire, some of these banks, it costs $100 for a simple wire transfer. So cross-border remittances for a small company, if you have an offshore company, $100 for one transfer adds up to a lot of money. So it allows for these offshore banks to provide cost-effective business banking services. Using SWIFT, so you could do transfers for, could offer $10 for international wire transfer. So it would significantly reduce the costs of transferring of money. So it will be, without a correspondent partner, an offshore bank would be free to take on clients and do business as it sees fit. So countries like the US are trying to push out ICOs, initial coin offerings. For example, Hong Kong and Singapore and Malta are working hard to attract this type of new technology involving initial coin offerings, blockchain and such. I'm going to touch on a little bit about Malta from my podcast. The Monetary Authority of Singapore recently released a guide to digital token offerings, It outlines the procedures around initial coin offerings in Singapore. And if you'd like a copy of that, you'll get that on my PowerPoint and you could download that. So just to finalize, I'd like to talk a little bit about Malta, as known as the blockchain island. I'd like to, for everybody to just listen a little bit of my podcast where I interviewed a colleague and friend of mine who's based in Malta, in Europe, and we worked together on offshore investments going to Malta, going to Portugal, and other areas. So you'll just listen to just 5 minutes of the podcast, and then I'll ask well, should I show the question first, or I should show the question first? Yeah.
You want to show the question first, and then
yeah.
See if they get it. Okay.
Thank you. Stop.
Yeah. Or I don't know. What do you suggest?
I think you can just ask them the question.
I could ask them the question. Okay, great. Okay, so just listen to 5 minutes of this podcast relating to Malta and the blockchain island, talking about ICOs and cryptocurrencies relating to foreign investment. So we'll have a question for you at the end of the. It's a brief podcast. Like I said, you could listen to the podcast that I have on iTunes. And you can see the transcript of it. We're just going to do a 5-minute audio on that. Okay, thank you.
Welcome to